This GovLove episode is sponsored by Polymorphic. Local government staffers like city clerks typically field a lot of phone calls from residents about information that can be found on their websites. Polymorphic provides free, that's right, free AI enhanced search functionality for local government websites that helps residents find what they need more easily and can reduce phone calls to staff by up to 20%. It's free because Polymorphic thinks you'll like it so much you'll want their paid products too. It takes just 15 minutes to set up. Try it out. Just email your local gov URL to demo@polymorphic.com. Then they'll reply with the demo link to the search completely set up on your site to try it out. You can also visit polymorphic.ai to learn more. That's POLIMORPHIC.ai to learn more. Coming to you from Kansas City, Missouri, this is GovLove, a podcast about local government. I'm Lauren Palmer, the Director of Local Government Services for the Mid-America Regional Council, and your host for this episode. GovLove is produced by ELGL, the Engaging Local Government Leaders Network. We engage the brightest minds in local government. ELGL is now accepting nominations for the Top Influencers in Local Government list. This recognition honors people who make a difference in their communities and the larger local gov network, and who demonstrate ELGL values of joy, creativity, connection, dependability, and equity through their work and public activities. The nomination deadline is March 31st, and you can learn more at elgl.org. Today I'm visiting with Jose Landeros, the Director of Strategic Development for El Paso County, Texas. We're talking about the county's program to enhance childcare through its participation in ICMA's Economic Mobility and Opportunity Cohort. Jose, welcome to GovLove.
Hey, glad to be here, and congratulations, as a Kansas City area resident on being home to the back-to-back defending Super Bowl champions.
Hey, thank you, Jose, for remembering that. Yeah, all of us in Kansas City are really excited to celebrate the big victory for the Kansas City Chiefs, and our local government listeners will appreciate how awesome it is for community and sales tax revenues. So we're pretty excited here in Kansas City, and we are equally excited to have you as our guest today on GovLove.
Great. No, happy to be here, and as a lifetime Dallas Cowboys fan, it's it was just another typical year for Dallas. So we'll leave that at that.
Yeah. There's always next season.
Sure, that's it. It's going to be our year next year. I'm sure of it. Yeah.
Well, before we start our interview, we always begin with our signature lightning round to get to know our guests a little bit better. So to start us off, Jose, what song would you pick for your walk-up music?
I would go with Ready to Start by Arcade Fire. It's off of their award-winning album from 2009, same year I graduated from college. And it's a concept album that talks about urban sprawl and the suburbs, and the lead singer is from Houston originally, so there's also this tie into Texas. And when I was graduating from undergrad, didn't know what I was going to be doing with my life. Urban planning seemed like something I was interested in, and it has definitely left a mark all these years later. So that would have to be it.
Good pick. This song checks a lot of boxes for you. Local gov angle, Texan.
Right, that's it, and just good music generally, right? So that's also a cool part of it. Yeah.
All right, next question. What is the last movie or TV show you watched that you would recommend to our listeners?
I've been watching a lot of reruns on Disney, actually. So I have a 4 and a 2-year-old, 2 daughters. Absolutely amazing, beautiful, challenging, and crazy in the best way. And so I hear a lot of random snippets of Aladdin, Lion King, new stuff that comes out that I don't even know, like Pupstruction. But the last episode that I actually sat down and watched was an episode of Bluey, where Bluey and her sister are talking to their dad, who looks tired and stressed out. They're driving somewhere, and they asked him, "Do we make you feel old?" And he said, "Yes, you do." And then they kind of felt sad, said, but you also make me feel young, and that's why I love you. So you are. It was a good reminder for me, right, as a parent, father, to never take myself too seriously and always just kind of enjoy the chaos because it's evidence of their life. They're healthy and they're being crazy and loving in their own way. So that's my that's my advice for anyone that has kids, thinking about having kids, nephews, family, young friends, whatever the case may be. It's a good series to watch.
That's awesome. I think a lot of our young parents in our listening audience are probably feeling very seen right now with your description of feeling old and yet energized all at the same time. I loved your description of your little girls as beautiful and wonderful and also wild.
Right, right. That's it. That's the organized chaos that is childhood, but it's what makes it rewarding and inspiring at the same time. Cool.
All right. Well, our final question for you, Jose. What was your best vacation and why?
Um, Man, I went to Copenhagen for my birthday about 6 years ago and had the most amazing time. My birthday's in March, so it never got above 32 Fahrenheit, and it was snowing and gray and everything that you'd expect of like a Nordic country, Northern European country. And what was really cool was visiting this taco shop. It's called Hija de Sanchez. And so the chef's name was actually, I think, a dessert chef at Noma, that Michelin star restaurant that is winding down operations this year. And her parents are Mexican immigrants, and she was raised here in the United States. And she followed her culinary career to Copenhagen. And so she opened up this authentic Mexican taco shop in Copenhagen. And so amongst, this very like gray and cold March day, walked into this taco shop and it was just like this vibrant color. It was like, like a very Mexican themed restaurant. There was like some Otis Redding playing. There was this guy behind the register with a New York Yankees cap and he's like, "What's up?" And it was just like the slice of, oddly enough, Americana in Copenhagen, but it was Mexican, and like some of the best tacos that I've ever had, and it was there in Denmark, and it was such a cool experience. And all in all, I mean, just the culture, people walking around, very pedestrian oriented, very cyclist oriented. It's just very, like most European cities, it has a very different development style and how the city came to be. So it's a great space, and really enjoyed that vacation.
All right, thanks for sharing that. I wasn't sure where that story was going. I was getting a little confused with a Texan recommending Danish tacos. But then as you continued and described, okay, we're talking about authentic Mexican food here, that started to make a little more sense. So, yeah, sounds like a perfect experience where you had a little bit of home and something totally different and European too.
Yeah, I used to gatekeep Mexican food. I know that El Paso is the best Mexican food in the country, hands down. I will debate that at length with anyone who wants to debate it. But um, you know, food brings people together, and so if it's good to you and it's all about the people you're with and the experiences you have, then there's no really any reason to not try it. And if anything, saying that you've had tacos in Denmark gives you a story for a podcast in the future, right? At least it did me. So that's good.
100%. I mean, of all of the reasons to want to travel to Denmark, I would not have had tacos on my list
Yeah.
until this conversation. So that was very enlightening. And yeah, thanks for reminding me that El Paso has the best Mexican taco food. I've not been to El Paso. It's a place I'm really looking forward to visiting. But I understand what you mean, that passion for food and community. Of course, Kansas City has the best barbecue, which sometimes I don't understand why, but sometimes people try to challenge me on that. So you just keep waving that flag for El Paso tacos.
That's it, right? We have to be bastions of our city states, and I'm a proud one for El Paso.
That's right. Carry that pride.
That's right.
All right. Well, thank you, Jose. Good to get to know you a little bit better. And now we're going to dive into the heart of our interview. And before we start, I just want to say for our listeners that Jose was a guest who was recommended to me by another colleague in our local government listening audience who visited El Paso recently and did some work with you as part of the ICMA Economic Mobility Cohort. And it was first time visitor and said to me like, El Paso is really cool. Like they're doing some really interesting, innovative, creative things. So we're going to give you a chance to talk about that today. So I just want to give that little plug to our listeners. If you or other people you come across in your local government network are doing something that strikes you as really cool and innovative, we want to hear about it and we want to tell that story on GovLove. So reach out to us so we can have that opportunity. And Jose, we're giving you that opportunity today. So we want to start. Just tell us a little bit about your career path and what led you into your current role at El Paso County.
So I, love El Paso. It's the community that made me who I am and has given me countless opportunities to serve and give back. But 18-year-old me, 17-year-old me wanted to get as far away from here as I could. I wanted to almost get away and never look back. And so, back then you used to get mail directly from universities and colleges offering scholarships and other things. And I had this stack of stuff on my desk in my room. And at the top was an envelope from the University of Texas at Austin. And then right below it was one from Texas A&M University. And I read a little bit about them and the scholarship opportunities that they were offering. And I chose to go to Texas A&M without ever having visited the campus, without knowing anything about the campus culture or the traditions and the history, which some would, make akin to like a cult-like following. It's very true. I think that's a very accurate description of what it is to be a Texas Aggie. And I hated it. I hated it. I wanted to come home. And I spoke to my godfather who told me, stick it out the year. If you don't like it at the end of that first year, I will come myself and pick you up and bring you home. So it was, and it worked out, and graduated with my my Bachelor of Science in Political Science. Somewhere along the way in those 4 years, I got lost. I was supposed to graduate with a biochemistry degree and go on to medical school and be a doctor to serve the community. And instead, I ended up with a political science degree. And when I switched into the College of Liberal Arts, I remember the phone call with my mom, and she asked, "Liberal arts, isn't that what people who don't know what they want to do with their life major in?" And I said, "No, I'm going to be a lawyer. That's probably what I'm going to do." And so after graduating, I moved back home because I realized that the reason I wanted to switch to political science was to figure out my niche to serve and help the community and give back to the community that had given me opportunities, so that when I had kids of my own, if I had kids of my own, that they would have a chance to come back home to a good career, to a vibrant economy. So I was working for a nonprofit that dealt in hiring high school students to do public policy analysis. I was lucky enough to go through that program. It was started by a group of civic leaders in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it was called Community Scholars. And it gave me a really great insight at the age of 15 about what government was and how government could help people. And so I was working there, and I did my undergrad. I completed my undergrad, and I went on to start my got an MPA from UT Arlington, and finished that up, and then started working. I had a friend who worked for a congressman, or a former congressman here actually, and he called me one day and he said, "Hey, I have this crazy idea. I'm going to run for office. Can you help me?" And I said, "I don't know what I'm doing, but sure, let's do it." And he said, "I don't know what I'm doing either, so let's go for it." And he won, and he was elected to office. And so I became a senior policy advisor here at the county, and that's how I began my time here at the county almost 12 years ago. And since then, I transitioned out of his office. I realized that there's a pretty important distinction between public policy and politics, and public administration politics, and sometimes those lines are blurred because of the leadership and elected officials. But I really wanted to have a chance to work on the administrative side of county government. So I moved over into a position, applied for a position in the public works department that was the director of planning and development. Moved into that role and was there for about 3 years. And over the past 2 years have been in this new role in our county administration office, which is led by the county's chief administrator. And so in this role, I help the county manage all of the funding that we receive through the American Rescue Plan Act, as well as help the county evaluate future capital finance opportunities. So helping report and manage the county's capital debt program, and also preparing new debt issuance opportunities for the region. So it's taken me a while to figure out what I'm going to do. My mom still tries to push me to medical school every chance she gets. But now I think she's pushing that energy onto her granddaughters. And so, hopefully one of them can make her happy and become a doctor.
Of course. Yeah, when you were describing you got lost on your way to biochem, sounds to me like you got found.
Right. Yeah, time will tell.
Yeah, right. But you're doing great work in your county, and we want to hear more about that. So just set the stage for us. Tell us about El Paso County for those who maybe haven't visited yet and aren't as familiar,
Yeah.
including me.
Yeah, El Paso is far west Texas, right? Sometimes people they'll refer to West Texas, but that includes Midland and Odessa, which are roughly 4 or 5 hours from here. So El Paso County is the gateway to Texas from the West Coast. We are equidistant from Houston to LA. In fact, if you were able to flip Texas over on its most eastern boundary with Louisiana, El Paso would land in the Atlantic Ocean, well beyond Florida. So that's not just to brag about the size of the state of Texas, but more so to highlight the fact that El Paso County is also pretty geographically isolated. We really rely on a binational, tri-state region to be successful as an economy and as a culture. We have our sister city in northern Chihuahua, which is northern Mexico, and that's Ciudad Juarez. And then we also have Las Cruces, which is in Doña Ana County in southern New Mexico. And then we have parts of Otero County, also in southern New Mexico. So really this area, El Paso County, is about 900,000 residents. But when you look at our region, and including northern Mexico and southern New Mexico, it's about 2.5 million people that comprise this binational metro area. And so it's a bicultural, binational community. About 70% of our population is bilingual. About 1 out of every 4 El Pasoans is foreign born. So it's a very, obviously that's to be expected when we're thinking about a community placed along the U.S.-Mexico border. But it's been a very enriching place to grow up, because it's given me an opportunity to see a lot of challenges that are, initially thought to be unique to this area. But as you engage with leaders from across the country, the issues that local governments face often are duplicated for different reasons in different jurisdictions. And so it's interesting to see the solutions that are being developed, across the country for issues that we're having and facing here in the area. But our economy is largely driven by public sector industry. We have a very large sector of federal and state and local law enforcement, just by virtue of being a binational community. We're also home to Fort Bliss, which, when you combine the footprint of the Army installation with White Sands Missile Range, which is also under the Army's command, you have the largest contiguous restricted airspace in the country. And so that also means there's a lot of defense sector industry activity here. We have a thriving university at the University of Texas, El Paso. They're doing some amazing things to balance access in terms of being a place for first-generation college students to attend against, academic and research excellence. They're a top-tier research university as well. So they're very committed to ensuring that not only are they prestigious enough in the work that they do and the caliber of professors that they recruit, but that those professors and professionals also understand the importance of creating an atmosphere where students can succeed, especially non-traditional students who are entering who might be their family's first in terms of entering college and ultimately graduating from college. So all that together makes up the place that I love to call home. And, I know it's supposed to be a pretty quick snippet, but I could go on, and I know we have more stuff to talk about. So
Yeah, thank you.
that's El
Well,
Paso County.
I appreciate that you took time to describe the broader region. I mean, go regions, that's talking my language. And man, I thought I had problems with the bi-state situation. Binational is like a whole other cadre of issues. So eager to learn more about that. Um, I'd love to have you talk about something else unique about El Paso County that I learned in preparation for this episode. So the county has over 300 subdivisions that were developed without essential services. Can you explain the history of those developments and how it's affecting the community today?
Yeah, no, that's a really unique topic to life along the U.S.-Mexico border. And so you see this issue in other border states like New Mexico and Arizona and even parts of California, and obviously along the Texas border. But these colonias, which is the Spanish word for neighborhood, were developed in the 60s and 70s without access to water, sewer, electric service. Roads were never paved, sidewalks were never installed, no stormwater infrastructure. Effectively, they just sold raw land that was, maybe graded so that you could put a manufactured home on the lot. And that was really it. And it's interesting when you look at the timeline of this happening and you compare it to the development of suburbs across the country, right? You have this pursuit of the American dream, the white picket fence with the basketball court over the two-car garage, and pursuing, all of the amazing opportunities following the Second World War. Well, the colonias are being developed on a parallel timeline, right? And we have suburbs here in El Paso that were developed in that post-war style of development. But these communities were really targeted to financially challenged or individuals who maybe didn't have a lot of financial literacy associated with them. So a lot of migrants, very folks really with limited socioeconomic mobility, who wanted to also, in the spirit of being responsible landowners, have a chance to pursue their version of an American dream, even if that version meant owning a piece of land with a manufactured home that didn't have access to services. So these areas, there's 300 of these subdivisions. About 1 in every 5 that are located within the state of Texas are located in El Paso County. They exist today. Some of them have been retrofitted where the state and county have gone in partners with water utility providers in the region, including partners like El Paso Water and the Lower Valley Water District, the Fabens and Tornillo Water Districts. They've all gone in to extend access to water and sewer, but it's cost significant amount of money. But it's also cost folks, because when you think about the ability to have a vibrant life and to pursue additional opportunities like college, like attending, great schools and universities, you have to have a fundamental, you have to have a strong foundation to build off of. And that starts with something as simple as being able to open the faucet and drink water out of the tap, right? And right now, we still have residents in this community that are still facing a lack of potable drinking water, and it's 2024, right? So these colonias have been in existence for over 60 years, and people still have access, and there's a number of reasons why that is. But I can tell you that we've worked diligently regionally, and especially at the county being a more regional level of government, to help increase access to water and wastewater infrastructure to provide for the health and safety of residents, because we really do view it as a fundamental right that in the United States in 2024, residents shouldn't be limited to living in the substandard development. And it goes beyond just the water and the sewer, but it also speaks to there should really be no difference between the quality of roads, the installation and availability of stormwater infrastructure, and also the availability of green space and parks for families and children to gather and have a safe place that they can identify as a community center. So we've worked and we're making strides using a variety of funding tools, including American Rescue Plan Act funding, to really deploy a significant investment in that type of infrastructure so that we can really raise the quality of life, give folks a foundation to build off of, with the hope that they can start to enhance and improve their socioeconomic mobility.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's just really fascinating kind of exposure of the economic disparities in our country, which is a perfect segue into what we're going to talk about today. El Paso County was one of 10 communities selected last year for ICMA's Economic Mobility and Opportunity Cohort, or EMO. So, Jose, just tell us, what is the EMO program, and then share with us the work that El Paso County is advancing through this program.
Yeah. So the ICMA EMO program was funded through a grant that ICMA received from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, all with the idea of helping local governments really figure out a way to help increase socioeconomic mobility for their residents. I think with the understanding that local government is uniquely positioned to really have a more immediate impact, right? I mean, we're the laboratories of democracy for a reason, and that's because the change is immediate. When a program is developed and you start to deploy services right away, you start to see some of the benefits of those investments a lot faster than some of the cogs of government that turn at state capitals, or even in DC. So what the cohort did was bring together 10 communities from across the country, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier. We identified a lot of the barriers that exist and what the drivers are for economic mobility, and we discussed in a very multidisciplinary way what each community was facing, what some of the solutions were facing. And the idea was to be able to build off of each other's expertise, challenges, and really have a group to support and share challenges and opportunities to address economic mobility in those specific communities. And that all wrapped up last year, and we were happy to host the ICMA cohort here in El Paso for some of our closing sessions right before the holidays.
So I want to hear more about your projects. When we prepared for this episode, you described to me that you did a needs assessment, and that needs assessment revealed some surprises. So tell us about that. What did you learn that was unexpected?
Yeah, so we partnered with Workforce Solutions Borderplex, which is the local workforce board that administers funds as an administrative arm of the state Texas Workforce Commission. They're an amazing partner that are very data and research driven, and so this was a really great partnership for us to develop with them. And the premise was simple, right? We've learned a lot. Well, I say it's simple, but there's people that know way more and are way smarter about this than me that probably say it's not that simple. But in the absence of them being here, I'm going to say it's simple. But yeah, the pandemic really highlighted a lot of vulnerabilities for governments across the country. And one of those that we saw was obviously childcare, and that's not anything different that I don't think any government didn't understand, especially as we started having conversations about returning to work. And what do we do returning to the office? And we can still have virtual meetings and everything else, but there's a want to resume in-person activity. And so what happens to childcare? And more specifically, because earlier I mentioned that so many of our employees rely on public sector industry, that includes law enforcement. That also, one of the other emerging industries that we have here that is one of our biggest economic drivers that I didn't mention was healthcare. We have a medical center that includes a children's hospital, and we have a burgeoning county hospital district that provides indigent care to the region. But then we also have a medical school, a dental school, a nursing school. And so all of this is coming together to really shape healthcare as an important industry. Healthcare is around the clock, 24/7 operation. And when we're looking at who is, and the fact that these are our economic drivers, that also means that there may be people who are in need of childcare in an after hours capacity that may not have access to that. And so after hours, really, we started looking at being from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. overnight care. So the question that we posed to Workforce Solutions, Borderplex or WSB, was, hey, so what can we do to understand what those needs are and what the solutions might be for this specific type of childcare? And so through their partnership with other local government agencies, they conducted a survey, and they looked at, they talked to industry experts, they talked to child care advocates, they talked to children's advocates, they interviewed members of the police officers associations and unions. They really wanted to understand the question, and we found, I think sometimes we confirm what we know when we talk to people, but we found that the two largest industries that required after hours, overnight care, were healthcare and law enforcement. Together they were like 2 out of every 5 respondents. But then interestingly, we found that there wasn't really an interest in leaving their children at like a daycare facility overnight, and they'd prefer to be with a family member, some sort of, or a paid sitter that was in home. So it wasn't about taking your child to a daycare or a learning center. It was really about having someone in the house that either was a family member or someone that you would pay to be able to take care and provide that child care. And so there's, the model for childcare, that we have, I think, as a country, is not really situated to support that type of activity. So, and there's also not an interest, right? We have a lot of these learning centers who are focusing on becoming early childhood education centers, where there's a set curriculum and there's structure, and it's not just a place for kids to safely play and exist in the day during working hours, but rather a place for them to learn. But there isn't a corresponding effort to say, let's extend this as a round-the-clock service, even though we have a pretty significant demand for childcare in the evenings. So it answered the question in a way that I don't think we expected. And so what that's done is given us some insight about going back to now understand the industry as a whole and figuring out whether there's any legislative changes that need to be made to perhaps provide funding mechanisms and support for this in-home delivery of service. Because at the end of the day, we know that some of the other takeaways of this study are obviously that childcare needs, if it came down to opposite sex couple, you had a male and a female, it's going to disproportionately affect the female if they're both in the industry that requires that. And so there's a lot of value and emphasis placed on bridging the gap in terms of opportunities for emerging female professionals. And so we want to figure out what we can do to identify solutions for all this so that we can mitigate some of the fallout that comes from not having adequate childcare during those hours.
This GovLove episode is sponsored by Polymorphic. Local government staffers like city clerks typically field a lot of phone calls from residents about information that can be found on their websites. Polymorphic provides free, that's right, free AI-enhanced search functionality for local government websites that helps residents find what they need more easily and can reduce phone calls to staff by up to 20%. It's free because Polymorphic thinks you'll like it so much you'll want their paid products too. It takes just 15 minutes to set up. Try it out. Just email your local gov URL to demo@polymorphic.com. Then they'll reply with the demo link to the search completely set up on your site to try it out. You can also visit polymorphic.ai to learn more. That's polymorphic.ai to learn more. It's really interesting. You did your needs assessment with a workforce partner. There's obviously a workforce development component to this project. So how are you supporting upskilling for childcare providers and expanding that workforce?
Yeah, so the county's programmed about $2 million of our American Rescue Plan Act funding to also partner with workforce to help increase the capacity for existing providers to provide a more structured learning environment. I know that when we're having some preliminary conversations about the project. An idea that's continually introduced is that we need to get away from this idea of daycare, right? It shouldn't be daycare, it shouldn't be childcare, it should be learning centers, early childhood education centers. And that's really something that we see here, and that we're trying to use an existing community partner who has established relationships because they dispersed funding to cover childcare costs during the pandemic to a number of providers. So if individuals qualified for childcare assistance during the pandemic, Workforce was the administering agency. So they have kind of this network of contacts already in the industry to start. And the reason why we're focusing on them is as a partner is also because the state of Texas has introduced a rating system for childcare providers. And that system ensures that these learning centers are certified and have the capacity to start to receive additional state dollars to kind of sustain the investment that we're looking to make. So in some ways, the county's partnership with Workforce Solutions is intended to be startup operating assistance in terms of technical assistance and maybe some small investment in equipment and technology to really elevate the operations of the existing providers, and also figure out a way to ensure that they're adequately staffed and that their owners are understanding what the staffing needs and constraints are going to be of operating a more robust level of service to the community. And so through these efforts, we hope to introduce a pattern that has some resilience and some sustainability to it because of the state funding that comes down. And this is really a big priority for us because we've been hearing here at the county for a number of years through different organizations such as ICMA or the National Association of Counties, NACO, that investments in children in ages 3 and 4 pay off significant dividends later on down in life. You have reduced costs of other services that the county may need to provide in terms of healthcare or criminal justice costs. They can all be avoided by making earlier investments in children, earlier on before they actually enter school. So we're thoroughly committed to seeing this through. We're expecting some good updates from Workforce Solutions here in the coming weeks because of the reporting that they have to do back to us, and then ultimately that the state is asking for. So we will see where we're what kind of progress we're making, but we're very excited about it.
You mentioned this distinction between childcare and early learning. Can you just explain more how you are defining those in your community?
Yeah, so when I think about daycare and childcare, I have this specific example of being a kid and being like in Oklahoma with family at a bingo hall, and my mom said, "Here, we're gonna just drop you here," and there was like a TV playing Fantasia, and the lights were off, and I was like sitting on the ABC carpet, miserable and crying because I just wanted to be with my mom. And so, but that was it, right? It was a corralled and confined space that I couldn't get out of as a kid, and I think that was that's like some daycare providers, right? And then I'm not saying that that's all daycare providers. That's probably a pretty harrowing description of a daycare, but I do know that we have a distinction between a place where kids can safely be supervised, but really are not guided in terms of activities that ultimately enrich their educational development. And I think that's really what we're going for. We're trying to identify opportunities for these childcares to upskill to learning by introducing perhaps the onboarding of a staff member who maybe is a former retired teacher who's just looking to give back now, or perhaps a paraprofessional who has some public school experience and can bring that experience into the facility. Because I'm blown away at the fact that my 4-year-old can spell all of her friends' names and can write all of their names, and she's 4. She hasn't even gone to kindergarten. And I was like, man, at your age, I was hanging out at a bingo hall daycare watching Fantasia, and here you are, doing all these amazing things. And I think that's what's going to set her up to succeed, and that's what's going to set up every kid to succeed, is making these transformative investments when they're younger. And we want to try and promote that as much as we can, and help business owners to understand that this higher standard of care, comes with a cost in terms of making investments in your staffing resources, the personnel that you onboard, even the spaces that you have, and the things you need to have to be successful. But that also increases your market share, right? So from a business perspective, if you're offering if you're offering a higher quality product in terms of care, you can, you don't have to necessarily raise your prices, but you can perhaps increase demand for your service. And so you can cover a lot of those costs. So part of the workforce development side of it is also providing some financial assistance and some technical assistance in terms of financial literacy for them to really understand the finances of this, because the last thing we want to do is create these, illustrious early learning centers that somehow price out the market of the very people that we're trying to help. And so it is about striking a balance and ensuring that they know that they don't have to start charging an arm and a leg. They do have to cover costs, but the enhanced service that they're going to offer is also going to mean increased capacity for them to have more students and do greater things with more of them. And that is going to be the difference. I think that will pay off dividends in 20 years when these kids are entering college, and we're seeing some of the benefits come to fruition then.
I mean, that's great the way you're describing the efforts that the county is making to try to preserve affordability while also ensuring that high standard of care. I know all of your work so far has been funded through ARPA. You mentioned some of the strategies that you're employing to sustain these services after COVID-19 recovery. Um, is there anything else that you can say about that plan to make sure that you can keep going after those dollars run out?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we have the opportunity to do here is, unlike it's not different from other strategies that may be developed across the state, right? I mean, Texas has 254 counties. It's huge, and all of them have a different way of operating. We have a number of municipalities. So I think what we'll do is, I mentioned the funding aspect that's coming through the state, right? And so that's unique, but a lean budget year at the state could mean reductions in funding availability for things that maybe are not prioritized as much as others. And so childcare might be one of those topics. So I think what we can certainly do is share the outcomes of what we're doing and the benefits that we're seeing, not just with organizations at the national level, but also even really focus at the state to be level of showing what this is. I think if you have a more unified base of people advocating for something, at the legislature that increases the opportunity for funding to be consistently made available, which is what we want to do. And maybe this is a way, if this is successful, for the state to start to pilot doing this, or providing technical assistance grants directly to other units of government that might have an interest, whether that's a county, a city, if you don't have an active, if you have a smaller county, or you want to have a more regional approach through a council of government, through a COG. I mean, all of those I think might be lessons learned. And so in some ways, this might be a proof of concept or a pilot that we could take to the state to consider funding across the state of Texas, which might help again increase the sustainability of these types of investments, not just for what we've made, but also for residents across the entire state.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I wish you luck with that. And I think other states will be watching to see how that develops and to look for successful models.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested in this work, Jose. Thanks for sharing. I know you were motivated by your needs assessment and what you were really hearing from your community as COVID-19 recovery needs. But hearing this conversation, some may consider childcare and early learning more a role for the school district or the nonprofit sector. Help me understand why the county is prioritizing this as a service of local government.
Yeah, we at the county, I mean, it's a well taken point, right? I mean, our school districts here I think residents are very fortunate that all the major school districts offer universal pre-K 4. Some offer pre-K 3 if you qualify based on a variety of factors such as income, being English as a second language, or for military dependents. And so that's just criteria of the for pre-K 3 in the district that I live in, because I know that when we were looking to I was looking to start my 4-year-old in school, that was one of the conversations that and research that I had to do. But I will say that we're not looking to necessarily manage the provision of childcare services, right, or in early learning. I think what we're trying to do is continue to allow the industry that exists to be successful and bolster their capacity, and really kind of provide incentive and a carrot to restructure the way that they work to be more effective long term. And the reason I think the county's placed significant emphasis on this is really in recent years, we've begun to take a larger role in discussing regional economic development. And so that's binational for us in terms of the movement of goods across the U.S.-Mexico border at the very macro level. But even at the micro level, we've had conversations with businesses who have expressed interest in locating or relocating portions of their operations into certain parts of our community. And some questions that we're asked often are, what are your childcare needs looking like? And so our economic development department is usually there to say, we can help coordinate your permitting, we can help coordinate your development questions, your issues, here are the incentives that we'll offer. But more and more, from an economic development, workforce development perspective, we're really seeing childcare becoming an issue. And so in the interest of ensuring that we're doing that as successfully as we can, we were thinking that we can provide, this is just what we do, right? In terms of economic development, we take an industry that has expressed an interest and we figure out how to support them and increase their chance for success in the region, and in terms of providing incentives. And so once those incentives run too, the county bears the benefit of that investment that we made in this business. And that's what we're doing with childcare, right? As an industry thing, we're looking for them to be successful. And I'll also mention that we've used funding from the American Rescue Plan Act to actually fund various nonprofit activities, including some that serve children with intellectual or developmental disabilities. And so the idea here is to really have a broad perspective on helping industry and not necessarily being the provider ourselves, but making the centers that already exist out there really be centers of excellence for learning for children.
That's great. It's really impressive work, and I wish you all the best, and we will be watching to see how it progresses as you move forward. Jose, is there anything else that you would like to share about your work in economic mobility before we wrap up?
No, I thank you for your time and the opportunity to share the story. El Paso is a great place, and it's just an amazing it's an amazing place to call home, and it's an amazing place to raise a family. And I think back to that 18-year-old kid that wanted to leave, and I think this is kind of the drive that so many of us in local government service have, is about serving the communities that we're in, that we're tied to. Sometimes we get lucky and it can be the place that we grew up, and that kind of even adds more, fuel to our fires. Sometimes it's communities that are new to us. But I think that human element is just what makes any local government initiative or project successful. And, I'm glad to be able to share our story today, and look forward to continuing to hear all the other great stories of all the other great work that's being done across the country here on GovLove. So thank you again.
Yeah, you're welcome. I will speak on behalf of the hundreds of thousands of residents in your county when I say I'm glad that 18-year-old kid decided to come home. You're doing some really great and important work, and I appreciate that you shared it with our listeners today. As we wrap up, if you could be the GovLove DJ, what song would you pick as our exit music for this episode?
Oh, man, that's a good question. 2 songs. I'm gonna go with Everything in Its Right Place by Radiohead, because sometimes everything is in fact in its right place.
Nice. I don't think I know that song. I will be excited to hear it. And makes me think of our conversation about the developments that you were mentioning, the good work that you're doing to help get them the services they need and improve their quality of life, everything in their right place.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that ends our episode for today. Thanks so much to our guest, Jose Landeros from El Paso County in Texas. Audience, thank you for listening. You can reach us at elgl.org/GovLove or on social media at GovLove Podcast. This has been GovLove, a podcast about local government.
It's right place, and it's right place, and it's right.